Hello everyone, this is Rick. Welcome to part 2 of the Egyptian civilization. If you have not gone through the part 1 of the Egyptian civilization, please go through that video because you need to understand the base before we go to part 2 of this video series. Now this video has been made in accordance to the ICSE or CISCE syllabus of class 6, but if you are interested in history, you can go through all of these videos in order to get an understanding of the Egyptian civilization. Now, I advise you to carry a notebook with you when you are watching these videos so that you can note down the important points. And also, for a better understanding, if you have any doubt, you can post it in comments and I will try to clear it to the best of my ability. So without doing any delay, let's get into details of part 2 of this video series. Now before we go into the details of part 2, let us have a recap of what happened in part 1. In part 1 we have discussed about introduction, where we have given a basis of the Egyptian civilization. We have discussed about the advantages of location, where we have stated the geography of the Egyptian civilization. Next, we have discussed how is Egypt a gift of the river Nile. After that, we have discussed about Pharaoh and how were they important in the Egyptian culture. Next, we discussed about the Egyptian society and the various hierarchical positions in the society. After that, we have talked about family life and also administration. So, today we will start what the Egyptians used to eat. This is very important because even if it may sound funny, but without proper food, no human or no culture can survive. So, how did the Egyptians used to get their food and what were the things which they had eaten? Egyptians relied on crops grown in the fertile Nile Valley. So, all of the food were from the crops which the Egyptians grew in the fertile Nile Valley. We know that Egypt was surrounded by deserts and seas on all sides. So, there were no fertile land where crops can be grown except the Nile Valley. Hence, all of the food were obtained from the crops which were grown in the Nile Valley. Common foods included bread, beer, fish, and vegetable like onions, leeks, and garlic. So these were the common foods which were consumed by the Egyptian people, and they included fish and vegetables. Fish, we can understand, can be obtained from the Nile River, and also there were vegetables like onions, leeks, and garlic. Meat such as cattle, sheep, and poultry were more commonly consumed by the wealthy. So, only the wealthy people or the rich people in the Egyptian culture could afford or could buy meat, and cattle meat, sheep, and poultry were very much expensive in the Egyptian culture. Hence, meat was very much reserved for the higher class of the Egyptian society. The Nile provided fish is an essential part of the diet. So all the fish which the Egyptians consumed was from the river Nile, and that was an essential part of the diet. While wheat, barley, and were staples used to produce bread and beer. So what were the uses of wheat and barley in the Egyptian culture? They were staple crops, means they were the base crops. Just like for most of the Indians, rice is the base crop. Similarly, the base food for the Egyptian people was wheat and barley, and they were staple crops which were in turn used to produce bread. We know that bread comes from wheat, and also it was used to produce beer. Beer is a drink which is made with the fermentation of different fruits and vegetables. Egyptian food production was advanced for its time with irrigation systems ensuring food security. So there were irrigation systems means water from river Nile was brought to the irrigation fields with the help of digging of proper water channels. So this was an highly advanced system in the Egyptian society. Hence the Egyptian food production method was far advanced than the other contemporary methods of the time. Now, dress. What did they used to wear? What was the dress or costume of the Egyptian society? Due to the hot climate, Egyptians wore light and simple clothing primarily made of linen. So, linen was the material used for producing dresses of the Egyptian people. And as we know that Egypt was situated in a place which has deserts all around it, and it is also close to the equator. Hence, this is a very hot area. The temperature was very high, so they could not wear heavy clothes. Thus, they had to depend on light and simple clothing, and all of their clothes were primarily made up of a material called linen. Men typically wore clit-like garment called shendit, while women wore simple dresses. So men wore a clit-like garment, and that garment has had a specific name called shendit. Many people call it as shendite. That is also correct, but now we will call it as shendit. While women wore very simple dresses. In the picture here, you can see what kind of dresses were worn by men and women of the Egyptian culture. The wealthy adorned themselves with jewelry, makeup, and elaborate wigs, which denoted status. So, the people who were rich and had money, they decorated themselves with a lot of jewelry. Just like today, if a person is very rich, that person can afford more jewelry. Similar was the case with the Egyptian society. The wealthy people decorated themselves or adorn themselves with expensive jewelry. They also wore makeup to enhance their features, to enhance their beauty, and also sometimes elaborate wigs. Wigs typically mean false hair, but here wig means designed headdresses which seems like their hair has grown in that specific design. So the more elaborate wigs people had, the more was their status in the society. Hence, very complicated wigs denoted high status in the Egyptian society. Clothing also served as a symbolic purpose, with certain colors and fabrics representing powers or divinity. So, clothing was also a feature of symbol, means it had a symbolic purpose, and certain colors and fabrics of clothing means some colors of clothing were reserved for some people only. So, thus clothing represented power and divinity. Divinity means connection towards God. Just like in our culture, we have the white or saffron clothing reserved for the priest. Similarly, there were some specific colors for certain people in the Egyptian culture which represented power or divinity. Children typically went without clothes until they grew. So, when people were kids, they did not wear any clothes as such. But when they grew, they adapted the garments of their social class. So, when people used to grow up, they used to wear dresses according to their social class. So, one of the most important feature of Egyptian dresses is that they dressed according to their social class. Occupations. What were the jobs done by the Egyptian people? Now, a society cannot function unless people work. So, Egyptians were very hard workers, and what were the jobs they did? Ancient Egyptians worked in a variety of occupations based on social class. So, according to their social class, ancient Egyptians did a lot of variety of works. What were their main works? Farmers cultivated crops and raised livestock. Livestock means they reared animals, they took care of domestic animals like cattle, goats, sheep, etc. So farmers cultivated crops means they grew agricultural products and also raised livestock means took care of domestic animals. Craftsmen produced jewelry, pottery and textiles. Jewelry as we know is used to decorate ourselves. So jewelry were produced by the craftsmen, and one of the most important aspect of any ancient culture is pottery. Without pottery we cannot store anything, we cannot cook anything. So pottery was also an important production which were made by the craftsmen. And also textiles, without textiles no dresses could be possible. So textile were also made by craftsmen. There were specialized craftsmen means people who used to produce only jewelry, or people who used to produce only pottery or only textiles. Soldiers protected Egypt's borders and helped expand the empire. So soldiers protected the borders of Egypt. As we know that Egypt was a highly advanced part of the then world, hence it needed protection. People used to attack Egypt sometimes, even though Egypt was protected by natural barriers like the desert or seas, but still it needed protection at the time of foreign attacks. So there were soldiers whose only job was to protect the borders of the country. Scribes and priests were highly respected for their literacy and religious roles. So people used to practice literature also, and those things were done by people like scribes. Scribes means writers. So they were highly respected because they knew how to read and write. And also the priest had their religious roles. Religious roles means they were closer to God, or they were believed to have been closer to God, or they had specific connection towards the deities. Hence, scribes and priests were highly respected for their religious roles. Egypt's economy was based on a mix of agriculture, trade, and crafts, with laborers and artisans being crucial to daily life. So it was not that the whole economy or whole system of society in Egypt depended on a specific kind of people only. Every person had their own jobs and they did it together. They worked very hard to keep the society proper and running. Hence, Egypt's economy was a mix of agriculture, means there were agricultural crop production, there was trade, means there was transportation of goods, and crafts, means there were people dedicated to special jobs like jewelry making, pottery making, and textile making. And also there were laborers and artisans who used to serve other people, and all of them together made Egypt a mixed economy. Trade and commerce. How was the trade and commerce? Trade and commerce specifically refers to business and markets in the Egyptian culture. Egypt's location along the Nile and access to Mediterranean and Red Seas made it a vital hub for trade. So there was Red Sea. If you remember the map from our last presentation of part 1 of Egyptian civilization, then you will know about the value of Red Sea. Red Sea is on the eastern part of Egypt and Mediterranean Sea is on the northern part of Egypt. And along the Egypt country there was the Nile River, which was not only a river but also served as a trade route for transferring of goods from Upper Egypt to Lower Egypt and also from Lower Egypt to Upper Egypt. Thus, Egypt's location along the Nile River made it a vital hub for trade. If people can communicate with each other, they will share things with each other also. And thus comes the aspect of trade. Egyptians traded gold, copper, papyrus, and grain with neighboring regions such as the Nubia, the Levant, and Mesopotamia. We have already discussed about Mesopotamian civilization in our last video series. Please go through it. It will give you a proper understanding of one of the earliest civilizations in this world. So, Egyptians traded what were the goods in which they traded on. The proper goods were gold, copper, papyrus. Papyrus means early form of paper used for writing. And also they traded grain with neighboring regions, means regions which were around the country of Egypt. And what were those regions? Nubia, Levant, and Mesopotamia. They imported goods like timber. Imported means which they used to buy or bring from other territories into their own territory. So what were those goods? Timber means wood. Luxury items means items which were reserved for rich people only. Ivory means things made out of elephants' tusks. And incense means uh, stick that provides fragrance when burned, from areas as far as modern day Lebanon and Punt. So these were areas from where they could buy things, or they used to bring things from those areas into their own country. And what were the goods which they imported? Import means bringing something in from another country. The typical goods of import were once again timber, luxury items, ivory, and incense. The barter system was widely used, but gold reserves and other precious metals were sometimes exchanged for goods. So there was typically a medium of exchange called the barter system. Barter system refers to business transaction where we exchange goods with goods. Means suppose I have rice, I will give you wheat, and I will give you the rice in order to get wheat from you. So that is how barter system works. But sometimes gold was also used as currency in the Egyptian economy. Egyptian trade networks extended across the Mediterranean. Mediterranean means towards the north of Egypt. It The trade network was also there in numerous parts of African continent and Central Asian continent, fostering cultural and economic growth. Now, how does culture growth happens with the trade transaction? When people are exchanging goods from one part to another, they are not only exchanging goods, they are also talking with each other, communicating with each other, and thus ideas also gets exchanged. Hence there is a cultural growth also because of trade and commerce. Houses. Where did the people live in the Egyptian culture? Now we have come to know about pyramids or temples, but it was not the place. Pyramids were not the place where the common people lived. Now, where was the place where common people stayed along with their family? Egyptian houses were typically made of mud bricks to, to combat the extreme heat. So it was very hot in the place of Egypt. And so the houses had to be made with mud bricks. Mud bricks means bricks which were not fried in kiln, means not red bricks. They were typically blocks of clay which were dried in sun in order to make mud bricks. So mud bricks act as a protector of heat, and this was very useful considering that there was deserts all around the country of Egypt. The common design featured flat roofs to allow for sleeping outdoors during hot months. So the roofs were sometimes flat, and because of that, people could sleep outside during the hot months. Okay, so the roofs were not typically pyramidal in shape, but sometimes they were flat so that people could stay on it. Houses were simple with courtyards for cooking and storage areas for crops and goods. So there were storage areas where people used to store their resources, and the houses were very simple houses, and there were courtyards for cooking. Courtyards means empty place attached with the house, and that place was used for cooking also. Wealthier Egyptians lived in larger homes with more rooms, including reception areas and storerooms. So, more you have money, more big your house will be. This is a common concept prevalent even today. So, wealthier Egyptians lived in larger homes, and those homes had more rooms, and those rooms included rooms like reception rooms, drawing rooms, store rooms. All these things were there in the houses of wealthy people. However, the poor people or the common people lived in much simpler houses. Houses often had whitewashed walls to reflect heat, and wealthiest homes had ornate decorations. So we know that white color reflects heat or absorbs less heat. So houses were often whitewashed, means their walls were painted white in order to reflect the heat so that the house stays cool. And the wealthiest homes had good decorations. So if a person was rich, he built a large house and decorated his house in a more extravagant manner than the common people. Now, recreational activities. Just like today we play games, the Egyptian people also had some kind of entertainment. It is true that they did not watch movies like we do, but still they had a lot of resources for entertainment. And those entertainmental activities are called recreational activities. Egyptians enjoyed many forms of leisure. Leisure means passing time, doing something to pass time, including sports, games, and religious festivals. So, these were the mediums through which Egyptians got entertained or passed their times. And what were they? Typically, sports, games, and other religious festivals. Popular games included Senet, a board game, and activities like hunting, fishing, and boat trips along the Nile. So, what were the things they usually did? They played a game called Senet. Just like chess, it is a board game, and they also did activities like hunting. They practiced fishing along the Nile River, and sometimes they used to take a boat and used to go along boating trips in the Nile River. Children played with toys made of wood, clay, and leather, including dolls, animals, and balls. So, just like today we have toys for children, in Egyptian culture also there were toys. And what were those toys made of? There were wooden toys, there were clay toys, and also there were toys made of leather, including dolls. So there were many kinds of dolls also, and animals also. Animals not as in big animals, but dolls in the form of animals. And also they used to play with balls. Balls were typically made out of leather. Music and dance were integral to both religious rituals and daily entertainment. So, music and dance were there for religious purpose also and for entertainment purpose also. And what were the instruments through which music used to be played? We had harp, we had flute, and drum. So, all these things were used for playing music, and music was there for entertainment and for religious purpose also. Participation in festivals was common, with celebrations often including feasting, singing, and storytelling. So during the festivals, what was the common activity that the Mesopotamians did? They feasted. Feasted means eating together or community eating. So that was feasting, and they used to sing a lot of different songs, and also storytelling by the elders was one of the chief recreational activities performed by the Egyptians. Religion and belief systems. How was the religion and how was the belief system of the Egyptian people? Egyptians believed in a vast array of gods and goddesses. So they had a large number of gods and goddesses in which they believed, with Pharaoh seen as a divine intermediary between humans and gods. Now, Pharaoh was seen as the connection between God and common people. Hence, Pharaoh was respected as a god on earth by the Egyptians. Amun Ra, the sun god, was one of the most important deities, worshipped in grand temples like Karnak. So, Karnak was a temple in Egypt where the sun god was worshipped, and he was the most important deity. The name of sun god was Amun Ra, or sometimes he is also referred to as Ra. The afterlife played a crucial role in Egyptian belief systems, with mummification process designed to preserve the body for the next world. So the Egyptians believed that after a person dies, that person is transferred to another world where he will need every kind of things. Therefore, they used to mummify the body. Mummify the body means taking out the internal organs of the body and treating it with many chemicals in order to preserve the body, so that the person who is dying can carry the body in the next world. And also, along with mummies, different kinds of essential things used to be preserved. This is one of the most significant belief system of the Egyptian culture, where afterlife played a very important role. Afterlife means life after death. The Book of the Dead provided guidelines for navigating the afterlife. So there is a specific book which is called the Book of the Death, and that book guides a person on how to navigate or how to go to the afterlife. And gods like Osiris and Anubis were associated with death and resurrection. Resurrection means becoming alive again after death. So the gods like Osiris or Anubis were associated with all these systems. Now, obviously, these systems were not real, but the belief of the Egyptian people was very much strong. The temples were central to religious life, and priests performed elaborate rituals to maintain favor with the gods. So, all of the religious activities were done in the temples. So, temples were very much useful in the religious life, and the priests who were worshippers of God used to perform a lot of elaborate rituals in order to get favors, in order to get blessings or facilities from the gods. So thus religion and belief system of the Egyptian is very much significant and important part of Egyptian culture. With that, we end the part 2 of our video on the Egyptian civilization. Hope you have liked it. Please post your doubts in the comments, and help me to reach a greater audience by telling your friends about this. You can use this video for your regular studies, and it will help you in your exams. Thank you so much for your love and support.